Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are heading into some truly turbulent waters. We are setting the clock back to the turn of the 17th century.
A really fascinating, and I have to say, pretty brutal period.
Absolutely. We're looking at a 17-year window in Ireland, specifically between 1597 and 1614. And I think this is a time and a place that a lot of people have a sort of vague notion of.
For sure. You think Elizabethan collars, mud, maybe some rebellions happening somewhere out in the bogs.
Exactly. But when you actually zoom in, when you get down to the street level, the complexity is just staggering. It's not a simple story at all.
It really isn't. You've got the final dying days of Queen Elizabeth III's reign, then the rise of James I of England, who was already James VI of Scotland, and right in the middle of all that political change, Ireland is essentially on fire.
Both literally and metaphorically.
Oh, absolutely. There are wars, but there are also these deep, burning cultural and religious conflicts happening in every town, in every family.
And to guide us through this, we aren't just looking at, dry statutes or military maps. We're looking at a really interesting set of excerpts from Edward Rutherfurd's massive historical novel, The Rebels of Ireland.
Which is a bit of a departure for us. We usually stick to nonfiction.
It is. But I think it's important to explain why we're using it here. Rutherfurd is known for this incredible, meticulous research. He takes the real hard history, the dates, the battles, the theological disputes that were happening, and he weaves them through the lives of these fictional families.
So we get the history, but we also get the heartbeat. We see how these huge events actually affected people's lives.
Yes, and that's often the best way to understand history, isn't it?
I think so. You can read about a religious shift in a textbook, and it feels so abstract. It's just a phrase. But when you see, through a character's eyes, how that shift tears a family apart at the dinner table, or complicates something as human as a marriage proposal,
Suddenly it clicks.
it clicks. You realize these weren't just abstract ideas floating around. They were survival mechanisms. They were choices people had to make every single day.
And the setting here is just crucial. We're not talking about all of Ireland. We're focused on a very specific area.
The Pale.
The Pale, which is basically Dublin and its immediate surroundings, and it's this English-controlled bubble versus the wild territories just outside, especially the Wicklow Mountains. There's this constant tension at the borders.
It's like a frontier, a very violent, very porous frontier.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack the collision of three distinct worlds. Rutherfurd sketches out the society in 1597, and honestly, if you're not paying attention, it's easy to get confused because the labels don't mean what you think they mean today.
It's a Venn diagram that's essentially on fire. It's not a simple us versus them situation.
Right, because usually when we think of Irish history, we think in binaries. British versus Irish, Protestant versus Catholic. But Rutherfurd makes it crystal clear that in 1597, it's a three-way standoff, at least, and the lines are incredibly blurry.
At least three ways. And the most fascinating group, for me, and the one that kind of gets lost to history, is this group called the Old English.
This is the group represented by the Walsh family and their cousins, the Doyles, in our source text. Let's really unpack this term, Old English, because it sounds like a complete oxymoron to modern ears.
It does. So these are families like the Walshes. They are the descendants of the Norman invaders who came over in the 12th century. We're talking the 1100s.
So by the time our story starts in 1597, they've been in Ireland for 400 years.
400 years. I mean, that's longer than the United States has existed. They're deeply, deeply rooted in this land.
So how do they see themselves?
Well, if you ask Martin Walsh, who's the father figure in our story, who he is, he would straighten his back and say, I am a loyal subject of the crown. They speak English, they follow English common law, they see themselves as the outpost of civilization on what they consider a savage island.
Okay, but here's the rub. They've been in Ireland for 4 centuries. They've intermarried with powerful Gaelic Irish families. They've adopted some of the customs. There's a practice called fosterage, where they'd send their kids to be raised by Irish clans to build alliances. So they're culturally mixed.
And, most importantly, they stayed Catholic when England turned Protestant under Henry VIII and then Elizabeth. That is the deal breaker.
So to the second group, the New English, the guys just getting off the boat from London, these Old English families look suspiciously Irish.
Completely. There was a famous phrase used at the time, Hibern yours, hibernus ipsis.
More Irish than the Irish themselves.
Precisely. To a guy like our antagonist, Dr. Simeon Pincher, a man like Martin Walsh isn't a fellow Englishman. He's a papist who's gone native. He's almost worse than the so-called wild Irish because he's a counterfeit. He should know better.
He's viewed as a corrupted file.
That's a great way to put it. He's this weird hybrid that doesn't fit into their neat boxes.
That is such a precarious position to be in. You're too English for the Gaelic clans out in the mountains, but you're too Catholic and too culturally Irish for the English government that you're trying to be loyal to.
You're squeezed from both sides. And that squeeze is the engine of the whole first half of the book. It's not just about warfare. It's about this deep identity crisis. Martin Walsh is desperately trying to prove he belongs to a system that has already decided fundamentally to reject him.
And that system is being run by player 2 on the board, the New English.
Right. These are the new arrivals, the administrators, the soldiers, the adventurers, the second sons who aren't going to inherit land back in England. They're coming over with Elizabeth's armies and later James's bureaucracy.
And they are Protestant.
Fiercely Protestant, often Calvinist, which is a very particular and rigid brand of Protestantism. And they are coming over with a very specific worldview, a whole lot of ambition, and a deep suspicion of everyone else on the island.
And finally, that brings us to player 3.
The native Irish, or the Gaelic Irish. These are the clans whose ancestors have been in Ireland for thousands of years. The O'Byrnes and the Wicklow Mountains, the great O'Neills in Ulster. They're living beyond the pale, holding on to their own ancient laws, Brehon law and customs that are slowly being strangled by the expanding English administration.
So you have these 3 groups all circling each other, all trying to survive. And the hook for today's deep dive is that this isn't just about maps and treaties.
Not at all.
We are going to talk about a massive gunpowder explosion that levels a city street. We're going to talk about a heartbreakingly pragmatic arranged marriage, a secret Jesuit son who despises his own father's compromises, and this is my personal favorite, a Puritan doctor who tries to get a good night's sleep in the middle of a very loud, very rowdy Irish wake.
That last scene is just a masterclass in cultural collision. It's funny, but it's also incredibly revealing about the mindsets of these two worlds.
It really is. So let's jump right in. Part 1. The year is 1597. We are introduced to a character who really embodies this New English mentality, Dr. Simeon Pincher.
Simeon Pincher. The name almost tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? It sounds restrictive, tight, pinched.
It really does. And Rutherfurd describes him as tall, thin, balding, with stern black eyes that belonged in a pulpit. He's a Cambridge graduate, a man of letters, and he's arriving in Dublin to teach at the newly founded Trinity College.
Now, we should pause on Trinity for a second. Today, you think of Trinity College as this grand, sprawling, ancient university. But in 1597, it was brand new. It was a tiny Protestant fortress in the middle of a fiercely Catholic city.
So its purpose was strategic.
Entirely.
Yeah.
It was established specifically to educate the clergy and the administrators who were going to, in their words, civilize Ireland. So Pincher isn't just coming as a teacher, he's coming as a kind of cultural and religious missionary.
He arrives with a very heavy suitcase of preconceived notions about what this place is and what his job is.
A whole shipping container of them.
He's coming to do God's work, but his definition of that is very, very specific. He steps off the boat at the Wood Quay. He's on Irish soil for maybe 5 seconds. He's probably thinking about his first lecture or wrinkling his nose at how dirty the streets are. And then, boom.
Literally, the ground just erupts.
He gets blown off his feet. Rutherfurd writes this so viscerally. He's lying face down in the mud and dust, can't breathe. He looks up, and there's this massive cloud of black smoke billowing over the city.
It turns out a spark from a horse's shoe, just a random accident, hit a keg of gunpowder that was being unloaded from a cart, and it set off a chain reaction with the other barrels.
And the devastation is immense. The lower part of Line Tavern Street is just gone, leveled. Even Christ Church Cathedral, this massive stone structure that has stood for centuries, is shaken to its very foundations. Tiles fall from the roof.
It's such a violent introduction to a violent land. It's almost as if the country itself is physically rejecting him from the moment he sets foot on it.
But here is the deep irony, and I love how Rutherfurd sets this up. Pincher's coughing, covered in dust. His ears are ringing. He's probably bleeding. And he is helped up by a kind, well-dressed gentleman.
Martin Walsh.
Martin Walsh. He dusts Pincher off, helps him to a nearby inn, buys him a drink of sack, makes sure he's okay. And Pincher, in his shock, thinks, finally, a good civilized Englishman, a sign of hope in this chaotic place.
Right, because Walsh speaks perfect English, he dresses in fine English clothes, he has impeccable manners. He fits Pincher's visual code for good guy. He's one of us.
But later that day, Pincher is absolutely horrified to discover that Martin Walsh is a papist. He's a devout Catholic.
And to Pincher, that's almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it? How can you be a gentleman, how can you be civilized, and also be a Catholic?
It breaks his whole categorization system.
Yeah. It completely shorts out his mental wiring. And this is where we really need to stop and get inside Simeon Pincher's head. Because it is so easy for us, from a modern perspective, to read a character like this as just a cartoon villain. You know, the dour, fun-hating guy who twirls his mustache.
Right, the stereotypical evil Puritan. But Rutherford does something really smart here. He doesn't just show us the stiffness, he shows us the profound, soul-crushing fear that is behind the stiffness.
Exactly. Pincher is a Calvinist. And we hear that word a lot, Calvinist, Puritan. But we need to really unpack what it actually felt like to believe it in 1597. It was an all-encompassing psychological framework.
So it's not just about going to a different church on Sunday. It shapes how you see everything.
Everything. So let's talk about the core idea. Predestination. We need to go deeper than just a dictionary definition. We need to try and understand the psychological weight of it.
Okay, so lay it out for us. What is the central belief?
The central belief is this. Before the universe was even created, before time began, God, in his infinite and unknowable wisdom, decided who was going to heaven. He called them the elect, and who was going to hell, the reprobate.
And here's the kicker, right? There is absolutely nothing you can do to change it.
Zero. It's already written. No amount of charity, no amount of praying, no good works, no buying indulgences like the Catholics did. None of that matters. If you're doomed, you're doomed. God's will is absolute, unchangeable, and fundamentally mysterious to mortals.
That sounds utterly terrifying. It honestly sounds like a recipe for nihilism. Why even bother getting out of bed? Why try to be a good person if it makes no difference to your eternal fate?
And that's the divine trap, as Rutherford portrays it. Because while you can't earn your salvation, you are desperate with every fiber of your being to know if you have it. You are living in a constant state of high anxiety. Am I one of the chosen? Am I part of God's plan?
It's like spiritual gaslighting on a cosmic scale. You're constantly checking your own spiritual pulse, looking for signs.
Exactly. Pincher uses this metaphor. He says it's like walking across a frozen river. At any moment, you never know if the ice will crack and drop you into the fires of hell. So the logic that developed was this. God blesses the elect. God favors the people he has already saved, therefore.
Therefore, if my life is orderly, if my business is profitable, if I am disciplined and clean and hardworking, these are not things that get me into heaven.
No. They are symptoms that you were chosen for heaven all along.
So material success isn't the cause of salvation, it's the proof.
Bingo. It becomes a spiritual diagnostic tool, a way to soothe that gnawing anxiety. And now flip it. Take that mindset and look at the native Irish through Simeon Pincher's eyes.
Okay, so I'm Pincher. I'm looking out from the walls of Dublin into the Wicklow Hills. I see people who, according to the text, are living in what he sees as temporary huts. They're moving their cattle with the seasons in a practice called bullying.
Which to him just looks like aimless wandering chaos.
They aren't farming in neat, square, hedged fields like in England. Their clothes are different. Their language is a guttural noise to him. He sees what he perceives as disorder.
And to Pincher, that disorder isn't just a different cultural lifestyle. It's not an economic system adapted to the terrain. It is visible, tangible proof that God has rejected them. Their poverty, their chaos, is an outward sign of their inner damnation. They are the reprobate, made manifest.
That is a profoundly dark epiphany. Because if you truly believe that, it means that when you go out and take their land,
you're not stealing.
You're not stealing. In your mind, you are replacing chaos with order.
Yeah.
You're replacing the damned with the saved. You are fulfilling God's will.
Pincher literally uses the phrase, letting in the light where there was darkness. It turns colonization from a grubby land grab into a holy moral imperative. He has to displace them to prove to himself and to God that he is on the winning side of history.
It recontextualizes the entire conflict. It's not just a political or military struggle, it's a theological one, weaponized. So let's flip the coin. Let's look at the other people Pincher despises, the people who confuse him so much. The Old English. We're going to jump forward 10 years now to 1607, and we're back with the Walsh family.
Back with Martin Walsh, the man who helped Pincher at the key. An act of charity Pincher would now see as dangerously naive.
Martin seems like such a tragic figure to me. He's described as cautious, he's a lawyer, he's respected. He just wants to survive. He's not a rebel, not a firebrand.
Martin perfectly represents the old English dilemma. As we said, these are families that have been loyal to the crown for 400 years. They fought for the crown. But suddenly the rules of the game are changing under their feet.
The English government in Dublin Castle is tightening the screws on Catholics.
Massively. They're being pushed out of public office, out of the judiciary, out of city councils, because they refuse to take the oath of supremacy.
Let's clarify that for a moment. What exactly was the oath of supremacy? Why couldn't a guy like Martin just, cross his fingers and say the words to keep his job?
Because the oath required any public official to swear that the king, in this case, James I, is the supreme head of the church. For a Catholic, that is a fundamental heresy. The Pope is the head of the church, Christ's vicar on earth. To swear the oath is to renounce your faith. It means you are excommunicated. You lose your soul.
So Martin is completely stuck. If he takes the oath, he believes he goes to hell. If he doesn't take the oath, he loses his profession, his status, and eventually maybe his land.
Exactly. And that's not all. On top of that, they've introduced recusancy fines.
What were those?
Every Sunday you fail to show up at the Protestant Church of Ireland service, you get a fine. For a wealthy man like Martin, at first, it's just an expensive, insulting annoyance. But for a smaller farmer or a craftsman, it's designed to bankrupt you.
So Martin is trying to thread this impossible needle. He's outwardly loyal, he pays his taxes, he's a gentleman, but behind closed doors, he's hiding priests in his house.
He's the classic muddler. He represents the old way of getting by. He wants to compromise. His whole philosophy is, if I just keep my head down, be polite, don't cause trouble, we can weather this storm. It will pass.
But he has a son, Lawrence. And Lawrence is not a muddler.
Not even close. Lawrence is the storm.
Lawrence Walsh. He's just come back from his education in Salamanca in Spain. He's a Jesuit priest, and he's operating in secret.
And that is such a crucial detail. We need to talk about what a Jesuit education in Salamanca meant in the early 1600s. This isn't your local friendly village priest. This isn't kumbaya Christianity.
This is the intellectual special forces of the Catholic Church.
It is. This is the cutting edge of the Counter-Reformation. They viewed the faith as a spiritual and intellectual battleground. They were trained in rhetoric, philosophy, theology, and logic. They were specifically trained to dismantle Protestant arguments and to stiffen the spines of wavering Catholics.
So you have this profound generational divide right in the Walsh house. Martin, the father, wants to keep the estate safe and muddle through. Lawrence, the son, wants to purify the faith and fight the war.
And Lawrence looks at his father not with respect, but with this cold intellectual judgment. There's a painful line in the text where Martin realizes he is found wanting by his own son. Lawrence thinks his father is too soft, too compromised. He thinks Martin is trying to serve two masters, God and the English crown, and he believes that's impossible.
That dynamic is so relatable, though, even today. The radicalized student coming home for the holidays to the moderate liberal parent, Dad, you just don't get it. You're part of the problem.
It's a timeless conflict. Lawrence believes that you cannot compromise with heresy. He sees the New English like Pincher, not as difficult neighbors to be managed, but as a spiritual contagion that must be sought, resisted, and ultimately expelled.
And this internal family tension, this clash of worldviews, brings us to the family drama that really anchors this whole section of the story, the marriage of Martin's daughter, Anne.
This part is just heartbreaking. It reads like a Shakespearean tragedy.
It really does. So the situation is this. Martin Walsh needs to secure his family's future. The best way to do that is through a strategic marriage. He needs to marry off his daughter, Anne. And the potential suitors are the Smith brothers.
The Smiths are an interesting case. They're a wealthy merchant family, but there's a persistent rumor, which Martin doesn't particularly like, that they aren't Smiths at all. The rumor is that they are actually descendants of the noble Gaelic Fitzgeralds, or maybe even the O'Byrnes, and they're just hiding their true lineage to survive in English Dublin.
So they might be native Irish who have assimilated, masquerading as English?
Exactly. It was a common survival tactic. Change your name from McGowan to Smith, cut your hair, wear English clothes, and hope no one looks too closely at your family tree.
But Martin is pragmatic. Money is money, land is land, and alliance is an alliance. The problem isn't the family name, it's the brothers themselves. You have Patrick Smith, the younger brother.
Patrick. He's the dream. He's charming, he's athletic, great at hurling and archery, he's handsome, he writes poetry. He is the romantic hero. And Anne is absolutely head over heels in love with him.
But then you have Walter Smith, the older brother.
Walter is solid. He's serious, industrious, a bit boring. He's the guy who's going to make sure the accounts are balanced.
He's the accountant versus the poet.
And Martin Walsh, who is advised by his deeply cynical and pragmatic cousin Doyle, looks at Patrick, the romantic poet that his daughter loves, and says, absolutely not.
Why? Why reject the guy she loves who's also from a wealthy family?
Because Cousin Doyle has a great line. He describes Patrick as unsteadfast. He's weak. He started to study for the priesthood and then dropped out. He's too much fun. And in a dangerous world, in a world where your entire estate could be seized tomorrow on a legal technicality, fun is a liability. Reliability is everything.
So Martin chooses Walter, the safe bet.
He chooses the safe bet. And Anne is, of course, utterly devastated. But here's where the story gets really dark. Her brother, Lawrence the priest, gets involved. And you'd think the priest, the man of God, would be the compassionate one, would argue for love, not a Counter-Reformation Jesuit, not Lawrence. He steps in with a cold, brutal pragmatism that makes his father's choice look soft and sentimental. He sits Anne down and he manipulates her.
You mentioned a specific term for this kind of reasoning, casuistry.
Yes, casuistry. It's a method of reasoning used to resolve moral problems by applying general principles to specific cases. But in the wrong hands, it can be used to justify almost anything. Lawrence deconstructs her emotions. He essentially tells her, your love for Patrick is just a biological urge. It's a fleeting passion. It's selfish. But the survival of this Catholic family, this bastion of the true faith, is a holy duty.
He has that chilling little rhyme he teaches her. It gave me chills when I read it.
Head over heart, the better part.
Yeah.
Heart over head, better dead.
It's just brutal.
It's chilling. He convinces her that her parents know best, that this passion will fade, but reliability and security will last. He turns her own piety against her. He makes her feel that loving Patrick is a sin of selfishness against her family.
But he doesn't just talk, does he? He's not content to just persuade her. He takes action. He plays God.
He does. He arranges for Patrick to be sent away. Without telling Anne, without telling anyone but the Smith family patriarch, Lawrence orchestrates it so Patrick is put on a ship to leave Ireland, ostensibly for business, or to continue his education in Spain. He removes the temptation.
And then the ship sinks.
Just off the coast of Cork. A sudden, violent storm hits. The ship is wrecked. Everyone on board dies. Patrick drowns.
And when Anne finds out, it's not just grief, is it?
No, the grief is there, but it's immediately consumed by something else. The text says she goes into a paroxysm of fury. It clicks in her mind. She realizes this wasn't just a tragic accident. It was her brother's direct interference that put Patrick on that specific boat at that specific time.
She looks at her brother, a priest, her spiritual guide, and she wishes him dead in Patrick's place.
The betrayal is absolute. It's such a heavy, heavy price to pay for survival. It illustrates that brutal pragmatism of the era. Personal happiness was a luxury they genuinely felt they could not afford.
It's the sacrifice of the individual for the perceived survival of the collective, the family, the faith.
And in Lawrence's mind, he's done the right thing. He probably believes he saved her soul and her family's future. Even if he broke her heart to do it, he would probably do it again.
And while this intense family tragedy is playing out in the drawing rooms and back alleys of Dublin, there is a massive historical event happening in the background. It's still 1607, and news arrives of the flight of the Earls.
This is one of the pivotal moments in all of Irish history. It's like the JFK assassination or 9/11 for 17th century Ireland. Everyone knew where they were when they heard the news.
So what was the news that spread through Dublin?
The news was that the great O'Neill, Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, and Rory O'Donnell, the Earl of Tyrconnell, had fled Ireland for the continent. They, along with about 90 followers, took a ship from Rathmullen in Donegal and just sailed away.
We need to contextualize this. Who are these guys? Why does it matter that a couple of earls got on a boat?
These were not just any two nobles. These were the last of the great, powerful Gaelic princes. The O'Neills had been, at times, High Kings of Ireland. They were the center of power in Ulster, which was the last province that had really, truly held out against English rule.
They had fought a huge war against Elizabeth's armies, right? The 9 Years' War.
A massive, nearly decade-long war that almost succeeded. They were finally defeated in 1603, but they were given a pardon by the new King James I. They had been allowed to keep their titles and their lands.
So they were defeated, but they were still earls. They were still powerful and rich. Why flee? That's the question Martin Walsh asks his cousin Doyle in the book. Why? They was safe.
And Doyle gives a very insightful, very poignant answer. He says an Irish prince like O'Neill, a man who sees himself as a king in his own land, cannot become a mere servant to a puffed-up English official from London.
Their spirits are free, he says.
Exactly. The new English system had no place for a king, only for a landlord. They couldn't adapt to being just another cog in the English legal machine, being summoned to court in Dublin, being sued by their own former vassals. It was a constant grinding humiliation. So they left. hoping to get military support from Spain and return with an army to reclaim their lands.
But they never did come back.
They never did. O'Neill died in Rome, old and blind, and their departure left a catastrophic power vacuum. This is the death knell of the old Gaelic order. With them gone, there was no one left to lead any organized resistance in the north. The back of the Gaelic world was broken.
There's a really telling scene where Martin Walsh and his cousin Doyle, who are old English, remember, loyalists, are drinking a toast to the fled earls. They are genuinely sad about it.
It's that deep, Old English melancholy. Even though they are loyal subjects of the crown, even though they probably fought against O'Neill in the wars, they feel the loss of the old world. They realize that with the earls gone, the buffer between them and the New English is gone. The Pinchers of the world are going to come for them next.
And that rising tide of fear leads to one of the most touching and I think most significant scenes in the source material. The scene at the Holy Well.
The Well of St. Marnoch.
Martin takes his young son, Orlando, who is Anne's little brother, out to this ancient Holy Well. Now, we know that Lawrence, the Jesuit, hates this place. He calls it pagan superstition.
Right. Lawrence represents the modern, organized, Romanized church. He wants proper liturgy, structure, Latin texts. He doesn't want people tying rags to trees and praying to local saints that might have been old gods. But Martin loves the well. To him, it's the old way. It's a connection to the sacredness of the land itself that goes back before the Normans, before the English, before even St. Patrick, probably.
It's something that feels authentically theirs.
Yes. And in this moment of deep anxiety with the earls gone, Martin makes his young son Orlando swear a promise.
Promise me, he says, that you will marry one day and have children.
It sounds so simple, but in this context, it's a desperate act of resistance.
It really is. It's an act of defiance. Martin realizes the walls are closing in, the military option is gone, the legal system is being turned against them. He can't win on the battlefield or in the courtroom, so the only way left to win is to persist, to endure, to keep the bloodline alive. It's not about battles anymore, it's about biology.
It's a shift from grand strategy to simple survival.
I like the old ways, Orlando. That line really stuck with me. It's a man watching his entire world vanish before his eyes and just trying to anchor his son to something, anything, that will last.
And it sets the stage perfectly for the final act of our deep dive. We jump forward 7 more years, the year 1614. The landscape of Ireland has changed profoundly. The plantation has begun.
Dr. Simeon Pincher is back.
And Pincher is angry. He's furious, actually. He missed out on the initial plantation of Ulster.
Let's just quickly unpack that term plantation. This is when the English government officially confiscated all the land left behind by the fleeing earls and their followers.
Millions of acres in the north of Ireland. There was a massive state-sponsored colonization project. The Crown seized the land, divided it up into neat parcels, and invited undertakers, English and Scottish investors, to take the land for pennies, on the condition that they plant it with British Protestant tenants.
And kick off the Irish who were living there.
And kick off the Irish. It was designed to completely re-engineer the demographics and culture of the entire province of Ulster.
And Pincher, our cautious Cambridge Don, hesitated. He was too cheap or too scared to invest at the beginning, and he missed the boat. He sees other men getting rich, and he feels, ironically for a man who believes in predestination, that he has missed his destiny.
He feels God's favor has passed him by, so he finds a new opportunity. Timber.
Down in Munster in the south.
He realizes that if you can't get the land itself, you can strip its assets. He looks at the ancient Irish forests, these primeval oak woods that have stood for thousands of years, and he doesn't see nature. He sees them as darkness to be cleared. He literally says, "I shall let in light."
Which is a very convenient moral justification for clear cutting for profit.
Precisely. It's a purely extractive mindset. The forest is just standing capital waiting to be liquidated and turned into ships' masts and barrels for the Royal Navy.
So Pincher travels south to secure this timber deal. And on the way, he needs a place to stay, and he stops in the Wicklow Mountains. He's advised by Martin Walsh's cousin Doyle and another character, Tidy the Sexton, to stay with the O'Byrnes at their stronghold of Rathconan.
Now, this is almost certainly a prank by Doyle and Tidy. A bit of malicious advice.
It's a total setup.
It has to be. They know Pincher is this rigid, austere Puritan who hates papists. They know he despises Irish customs. And they deliberately send him right into the heart of the O'Byrne clan territory, one of the most fiercely Gaelic parts of the country. You can just imagine them chuckling as they watch him ride off.
So Pincher rides up to Rathconan, probably expecting a quiet English-style manor house, maybe a nice roaring fire, a simple meal. and a quiet Bible reading before bed. Instead, he walks into a full-blown traditional Irish wake.
The old chief of the clan, Tuatha O'Byrne, has just died, and the entire clan has gathered to mourn him. And a wake in 1614 was not a somber, quiet affair. It was a festival of grief.
And this is where we really get the native Irish perspective, but Rutherfurd immediately shows us a fracture there, too. We meet Brian O'Byrne, the new young chief.
Brian is the modernizer. He represents the native Irish who are trying to pivot and survive. He wears English clothes, a black doublet, silk stockings. He speaks perfect English. He's trying to play the game, just like Martin Walsh was. He knows that to keep his land, he has to adapt to the new reality.
But then you have his cousin, Taj.
Taj O'Byrne. Taji is the wild Irish, the unreconstructed rebel. He wears the traditional saffron-dyed tunic. He wears his hair in long ringlets, the glib, which the English hated and had actually passed laws to ban. And when Pincher arrives, he is very, very drunk.
And he despises his cousin Brian.
Absolutely loathsome. He calls Brian an Englishman and a traitor to his face. He spits on the ground when Brian speaks. Taj represents the absolute refusal to adapt, the pure, simmering resentment. He's the guy who would rather burn the entire house down than remodel one of the rooms.
So Pincher, the Puritan, arrives right in the middle of this simmering family tension. Brian, being the polite modern host, gives Pincher a room up in the stone tower away from the main noise of the wake.
But you can't escape the noise of an Irish wake. The whole stone tower is vibrating with the sound from below.
Pincher is lying in bed, clutching his Bible, and he is terrified. He hears the keening, the ritual wailing of the women, and he views it as utterly savage.
To him, it's just a pagan howl. It sounds like demons. He has no frame of reference for this communal, loud, performative expression of grief. His religion is about silent, internal reflection and the quiet reading of the word. This is the opposite of that.
But then, the music starts. And this is such a subtle, beautiful moment in the text that reveals so much.
It is. The Willian pipes begin. A slow, mournful lament for the dead chief.
And Pincher, to his own surprise, likes it.
He does. He's moved by it. The text says he feels that melancholy yet thrilling warmth about the heart.
Why does the Puritan doctor connect with the Irish pipes?
Because the lament is sad. It acknowledges loss. It fits perfectly with his Calvinist worldview that life is a vale of tears, that we are miserable sinners living in a fallen world. He can understand sorrow. To him, sorrow is pious. It's an appropriate response to the human condition.
But then the pipes stop and the fiddles start.
And the jig begins. The tempo picks up.
And Simeon Pincher completely loses his mind.
He literally jumps out of his bed in a rage. He goes to the window slit and looks down and sees them dancing. There are torches, there's laughter, there's stamping feet, there is joy.
And why does the joy make him so much angrier than the wailing? Why is the jig more offensive to him?
Because to Pincher, joy is a sign of spiritual arrogance. If you are a wretched sinner, suspended over the fires of hell by a single spider's thread that could snap at any moment, how dare you dance? How dare you laugh and celebrate? He looks at their happiness and concludes definitively that they are damned.
He calls them lower than beasts.
Exactly. Because they don't fear God the way he does. Their joy, their vitality is the ultimate proof to him of their reprobate nature. He tries to block it out, gets back in bed, covers his ears, and tries to think about his timber deal. He tries to think about profit.
He tries to replace the sound of human life and community with the cold calculation of resource extraction.
That is the perfect summary of the colonial mindset in this era. This culture confuses and frightens me, so I will ignore it and focus on what I can take from it.
And the scene and our excerpts for today ends on this brilliant, tense, darkly comic cliffhanger. Pincher is finally drifting off to sleep. The door to his room creaks open.
And in stumbles a drunken Taj O'Byrne.
The angry, saffron-wearing, Irish-speaking rebel.
Looking for a quiet place to sleep it off.
And we just leave them there. The Puritan and the rebel, forced to share a room in the tower, neither speaking the other's language.
It's a fantastic piece of writing because it's a microcosm of the next 300 years of Irish history. These two groups are now stuck in the same room, the same island, and they have absolutely no way to understand each other. One wants order, profit, and piety. The other wants tradition, freedom, and the right to dance at a funeral. And there is very, very little room for compromise between those two worldviews.
So if we zoom out from that little room in the tower, what is the takeaway from this deep dive into Ireland circa 1614?
I think the real tragedy here isn't just the conquest itself. We know that story. We know the English won and the old Gaelic order fell. The deeper tragedy that Rutherfurd points to is the complexity. It's the internal fractures.
The brother betraying the sister in the Walsh family, for the sake of religious purity.
The cousin hating the cousin in the O'Byrne family over how to respond to the English presence.
And the tragedy of the middle ground completely disappearing. The people like Martin Walsh and Brian O'Byrne, the adapters, the people who tried to be bridges between these worlds.
They get crushed. They get crushed between the ideological fanaticism of a Simeon Pincher on one side and the violent resistance of a Tog O'Byrne on the other. There's no room left for the muddlers.
And that realization that civilization, as represented by Pincher, often just meant resource extraction. He didn't really want to save the Irish soul. He wanted the Irish oak. He wanted to monetize the landscape.
It really makes you think about how often, throughout history, we use moral language to cover up purely economic motives. I shall let in light. It sounds so noble, so enlightened, until you realize the light is just the sun shining on a clear-cut forest.
And that's the pattern. It's a pattern established here that repeats over and over again. We frame our ambition as a moral duty.
It's a powerful tool.
A huge thank you to the historical world of Edward Rutherfurd for giving us such a vivid human window into this incredibly complex time. It's a lot to chew on.
It always is. But it's worth the chewing.
So as you go about your day, consider that quote. I shall let in light where before there was darkness. The next time you hear a politician or CEO talking about bringing progress or modernization or disruption to a community, ask yourself, are they really bringing light? Or are they just looking for timber?
A very good question.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.